Welcome to my video on reading Caesar's de Bello Gallico, Book 4, Chapter 32. We're going to be doing some bracketing, some reading, and then some translating. And I'm going to take it sentence at a time. So I will stop at the sentences, make sure we have everything done up to that sentence stoppage, and then we'll keep going, and we'll do a sentence at a time. That way I have a chance to kind of pause and do whatever I have to do between sentences, and you have a chance to make sure you can pause it and go back in a certain sentence. So I'm going to try to chunk those off like that. Alright, so let's begin with dum ea gerontur, and that looks like a clause to me with dum starting it. Legione ex consuetudine una frumentatum missa, that looks like an ablative absolute to me. Alright, and we see ex consuetudine right here as a prepositional phrase. We have quae starting a clause here, ending at septima. Neque ulla ad id tempus belli suscipione interposita, that looks like an ablative absolute as well, with ulla being the subject, actually ulla suscipione being the subject, and interposita as our verb, so we should do that, and we'll label this as an a squared again. Cum definitely starts a clause because there's no ablative right after it. Pars hominum in agris remaneret. Okay, that looks like that's where it should end, but we see the next clause is pars etiam in castra ventitaret. So we have two subjunctives. We do not have any conjunction because we have parallel pars and pars, and they're all going in that cum clause. Ii qui proportis castrorum in statione erant. Now I see a qui clause there, so I immediately think, aha, I have to start a clause there. We're going to save ii for later. We see proportis castrorum, the genitive has to go with portis, so that's just right there with it. In statione, that looks like a nice preposition to me, and erant is our verb that ends our qui clause. Caesari nuntia verunt. There are the other core elements of our main clause going with ii here, so I'll put those in blue here. But to announce is a verb of speaking, and when I see an accusative, I'm immediately thinking there's probably an ACI, but we're going to see that in a second. Poverem maiorum quam definitely starts a clause, whether or not we have an ACI, and it ends at our verb feret. In ea parte, definitely, okay. Videre, now there's an infinitive that we were looking for, so I'm assuming that now we definitely have that ACI starting at pulvera maiorum. Now I would end it at videre, but I see a quam, and that looks like it modifies parte, so I have to keep that ACI going until that one ends, because you have to include everything that's dependent on a dependent clause as well. Okay, so there's our parentheses around in partem, legio in iter feciset, and that's the end of our sentence, so we have to end our quam clause and our ACI clause. Okay, so let's translate this. While these things are being done, with one legion, having been sent to gather grain out of custom, which was called the seventh, and with no suspicion of war, having been introduced around this time, when part of the men remained in the fields, and part went back and forth in the camp, and I think that has to do with patrolling. So maybe we can say part patrolled in the camps. Those guys who in front of the gates of the camps, on guard, those who were in front of the gates of the camps, on guard, announced to Caesar that a dust greater than, quam going with the comparative means than, right? So a dust greater than custom brings, in other words, that greater than is normal, was seen in this part. Into which part? Okay, it looks like we have to fix our brackets here, because quam modifies partem as an adjective, So it's actually into which part. Still referring to parte back here, but it definitely has this agreement going on here. Into which part the legion had made a journey, and that pluperfect. All right, continuing on. We start with Caesar id quod erat suspicatus. Now here, suspicatus without an s or an est, so this looks like a participle. We have to think about a participial clause, but before that we have a quod erat, a little short relative clause, probably modifying id. Aliquid novi a barbaris initum concilii. Now, this word suspicatus means to suspect, and that is a verb of the head. It's kind of a thinking verb. So, we're thinking ACI. We don't have an essa or an infinitive, but we have initum. Initum has to be our infinitive form without the essa. Caesar does this often, as you've seen before. So, we actually have a pretty big ACI. Okay? So let us, I'll use black to show the whole participle clause, but inside that participial clause we have this ACI. It goes like this, okay? Cohortes quae, okay, there's a quae going with cohortes. In statione erat. Secum is actually a preposition. In eam partem. Proficisci, okay, we have proficisci, which looks like a participle. What we have to do with that is yet again bracket it off. But we realize that proficisci is not a participle. It is an infinitive. So, we're thinking immediately that this has got to be some kind of ACI. We have cohortes, we have an infinitive, we have a whole bunch of clauses in the middle, but that doesn't really matter. But, I mean, the way that this is set up, it's looking like it's going to be another ACI. So I'm going to go ahead and preemptively bracket that off, okay? Proficisci, of course, is not a participle because profectus would be the participle. Perfecti in this case because cohortes is feminine. That's another reason it can't be a participle. But that proficisci is your passive, or in this case, deponent infinitive of proficiscor. Ex reliquis, that looks like a prepositional phrase. Duas in stationem succudere, that's another infinitive, okay. And looks like we have a series of ACIs here, don't we? Reliquas amari, another infinitive. Et confestim sese subsequi, another infinitive. This is a whole lot of fun. And then usit, of course, our head verb, our ordering verb, bossy verb that is taking all these ACI clauses. So we can stop there and translate a little bit. So we'll start back up here from Caesar. It looks like we have two words that are not independent clauses in this little sentence. We have Caesar and we have usit. Looks like the rest are in ACIs. So that's always fun. Or in participial phrases. Caesar, having suspected it, which was the case. And that's erat, quod erat, which was the case. Namely that something of a new plan was begun by the barbarians. Ordered that the cohorts which were in a guard position set out with him into this part, and that two from the rest follow into the guard position, in other words, take their place, and the rest be armed and immediately follow him. So we have three different ACI orders here that Caesar's putting forth, and you can see he's just kind of rearranging his troops because he's setting out to see what all the dust is about. So we'll see what happens next. Let's read the next part here. Okay, we start with cum Paulo Longius. When we see cum, I'm pretty sure we start a clause, so let's start that there. Paulo Longius a castris. Well, that looks like a prepositional phrase. Processiset ends our cum clause. Suos ab ostibus. Ab ostibus looks like a preposition. Premi, that looks like an infinitive. So if we have suos and premi together, I'm assuming we have an ACI. But we have atque, so we have to keep it going. But it looks like we probably started at suos. Aegre, sostenere, there's our other infinitive, so that's fun. But we have et right here. So maybe we keep going some more. Conferta legione. Ooh, that looks like an ablative absolute. Ex omnibus partis. That looks like a preposition. Telequiki. Oh, there's another ACI. So we have 3 different ACIs here, connected by 2 different conjunctions, atque and et, which tells me that the first 2 go together. I think that's because the first 2 have the same subject in suos, and the second one have a different subject, probably in tela, considering that's the only thing that can be accusative on that side. And then we have our head verb, animadvertit. Okay, this one isn't as long, so we can do this. Alright, so when he had proceeded a little longer from the camp, he noticed, animadvertit. You notice that this word animadvertit is, it kind of just means to turn your mind at something, okay? So it's like to pay attention to. It means to notice. So he noticed that his guys, suos, ab ostibus premi, are pressed by the enemies, and they sostenere, to endure, and then aegre is an adverb here, actually. Comes from ager, agra, agrum. That means like ill or sick, but it just means kind of poor in general. So we can say like they endured poorly. And with the legion closely packed, telos, spears, weapons were thrown together from all sides. So in other words, these guys are surrounded, and they're in a dense group, which is sometimes it's good if you can put your shields together for these tela being thrown at you. So we'll see. This is gripping stuff. We have another battle scene going on here already. So I think we should keep reading. Nam quod omni. So we have quod here for sure, okay? So let us bracket that off. Omni ex reliquis partibus. We can definitely say ex reliquis partibus is a prepositional phrase. Omni demesso frumento. That's actually an ablative absolute. Demesso is a participle. Frumento is our ablative subject. And omni, in that case, actually, it can be omne, but omni is also a possibility for the ablative. So we know that omni is actually going down here to frumento. And that means that this is a giant ablative absolute, like there. Okay? It's interesting to have the ablative noun come after the participle. But you can see how omni and frumento are kind of enclosing the clause. Much like the participle ends up closing the clause at the end. In this case is the adjective and the noun doing that. You'll see a lot in Virgil, actually, too. Alright, pars una erat reliqua. Now, here's the end of our quote clause, I believe. So we can bracket that up. Suspicati hostes. Suspicati. Now, suspicati, that looks like an infinitive, or a participle. So we might be dealing with that here. We had suspicatus earlier in the passage, so I think it's deponent and means to suspect, just as it did back then too. So it's probably going with enemies here, right next door. So the enemies, having suspected, Nostros esse venturos. We have another ACI here immediately. I can see that. Looks like nostros is probably our subject, but I'll start our bracket at hook because you can't suspect something to a place. That doesn't really make any sense, but venturos esse, you can come to a place, so we'll go with that. Noctu in suis delituerant. Now we see in Silvis, delituerant looks like our verb that hostes goes with as a subject. So let's bracket off our ACI right there. Actually, I believe we're going to end it at venturos. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so we're at a semicolon. I think we're gonna stop there and translate this part up to the semicolon. For because there was one part remaining with every bit of grain. That's omnifrumento, having been harvested from the other parts. The enemies, having suspected that our guys, Nostros, would come to that place, they hid at night in the trees. So it sounds like they're they prepared an ambush, and that's what's going on here. Remember, they were being attacked from all sides, from the other parts, and it looks like it's because they kind of predicted that because all the other places had been harvested, this was the only place for the Romans to get food. So they went there and cut them off when the Romans decided to get food there. All right, continuing on here, we see tum dispersos depositis armis in mettendo occupatos subito adorti paucis interfectis reliquos incertis ordinibus perturbaverant simul equitatu et accidis circumdederant. Okay, so a couple things I saw as I was reading that. Dispersos looks like a participle, but perfect passive participle, but there's not really much of a clause going with it. It's just kind of there. Depositis armis, though, is definitely an A squared. Apple absolute. In mettendo. Okay, that's going to be one. This one, however, occupatos is a participle, and I think that it includes in mettendo. So we're gonna go ahead and put those caret brackets around there. Actually, we might be able to do this here. I think we can make a good argument for that. That this absolute actually goes with dispersos. So those having been dispersed, with their arms having been dropped. All right. Anyway, subito adorti. Adorti is actually another participle, but it is not the accusative plural we just saw. It's actually nominative plural, meaning that this is representing our subject, which I think is an assumed ostes above. So actually, this is going with pretty much all of this, isn't it? So we have a giant participial clause with two participial clauses inside. Notice that all of these participles don't really have a noun head. They're just kind of there. These are actually substantive. So these are just like those substantive adjectives, except they're substantive participles. We've seen this a few times. But basically, this is that there's no noun head agreeing with them. All they are, they're just assuming the men who, having been dispersed and the men having been occupied. We don't really have to have a word for the men there, so we just know that they're accusative plurals here. All right, paucis interfectis is definitely an ablative absolute, so we can bracket that off. Reliquos Incertis ordinibus looks like another ablative absolute. There's so many of them over here. Let's label them. Perturbaverant. Okay. And I think that's going to be our subject, or sorry, our verb of the subject represented by odorti, which is ostes in the lines 2 to 3 lines above. Simul equitatu atque essidis circum dederant. Circum dederant. Probably the same subject as our perturbaverant word, but they're both pluperfect, so that works. Okay, so a translation. Then they, having suddenly attacked those having been dispersed with their arms having been dropped, and those having been occupied in reaping, and this is harvesting, I guess, the grain, they threw into confusion the remaining, the reliquos, the remaining people, with few having been killed, and with their ranks having been thrown in, uncertain, with their ranks uncertain, they threw them into confusion. At the same time, they surrounded them with cavalry and chariots. Right? We saw the word essidis when we were landing on the beach, and now here we have it again. So this is this ending is really, really difficult here, I think. And I hope that makes sense to you. I'll rewind this a couple times, make sure you understand what's going on. Make sure to ask me questions about it when we get to class. Thanks for watching. I just wanted to let you know that this video was kind of the bare minimum. You can definitely include pictures and any other kind of graphic or any commentary you want. I was just trying to get you through the text. This is more to check your work, but feel free to be more creative when you make your own videos. And maybe next time I will do the same. I just wanted to give you a resource for some kind of more of an answer key for this passage, if that makes sense. So I'll see you guys in class, and have a good one.